All right. Well, it's not a great day to be a Gator fan. It's always a great day to be a Gator, but not necessarily, Corey, a great day to be a fan of Gator recruiting. We've got some bad news, some big news, some bad news to report. And if you haven't heard the news, four-star receiver Joshua Moore, who committed to Florida this summer, has flipped his commitment from Florida to arch rival Miami. There's really no way to make it look, what's the word, to shine this turd. You can't really do that. Joshua Moore was really, I think you could argue, one of the two or three best recruits in the Florida commitment, on the Florida commitment list. Super talented 6'4" receiver, and he has flipped to one of your big rivals, the Miami Hurricanes. So no matter how you slice it, it's bad for the Florida Gators, who now have lost two commitments just in the last week and a half. The 2025 class is sort of on that edge right now, where it could go one of two ways. But we're going to break down this big news today. I'm Keith Niebuhr of Gators Online. I'm a little disheveled. I've been on the road. I'm in a hotel, had to evacuate Tampa. Joined by Corey Bender, also of Gators Online. He's covered Florida for a long time, and I've covered recruiting for a couple of decades. So we're going to try to give you the breakdown of this decommitment, what it means for Florida, how good he is as a prospect, yada, yada, yada. We're just going to do our best little impromptu rapid reaction here. So anyway, Corey, just your initial thoughts on Josh Moore flipping to the Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah, Keith, it's something we've been monitoring for a while now, several weeks. So like we noted before, he visited Miami 2 days after Florida lost to the Hurricanes in the season opener. That was notable. Miami just barely lost out to Florida over the summer. And then on top of it, I think the interesting part is he's been to Florida several times too. He was just in Gainesville for the UCF game last week, which was a win for Florida. So you kind of having a guy like that in attendance where the atmosphere is very, at the very top for a lot of these kids, you would thought maybe that would kind of sway him in a good way to kind of keep him in Florida's class. But he was fairly quiet after that game. We were trying to get him on the phone to kind of get his reaction. It was pretty quiet. And then obviously tonight was the big kind of kick in the gut for the Gators losing into the Hurricanes. And I don't think I'm surprised at that, which school he flipped to. Like I just noted, we've been tracking this for a while. But I thought at the time he was kind of interesting considering he was just in Gainesville, for a victory. So yeah. It's a stinger. He was the highest ranked commit according to the On 300 rankings, a top 50 prospect overall. Like you said, Keith, 6'4", has that prototypical size, and there's no way to kind of make this sound good. It was definitely a stinger for Florida.
Yeah, I mean, again, he's arguably your most talented. Now, I think Vernell Brown III. I mean, you could argue that he may be the most well-rounded commitment you have, but you could say that Joshua Moore maybe has the highest ceiling. Again, 6'4" receiver. Here's some of his rankings. We at On3 have him as the number 8 receiver in the country, number 41 overall recruit nationally. Now, On3 has him ranked higher than anybody else. We just love his upside. He dominated so far this season. And in the offseason, in 7-on-7, he was basically unguardable. So the ceiling is what you look at with this guy, Joshua Moore. So Joshua Moore committed to Florida over the summer. Corey visited the Gators a couple of times. They made a big move on his official visit in early June. In fact, that's when he said, hey, I knew I was going to be a Gator. He committed to the Gators in late June. And when that happened, and by the way, we'll try to get some of your questions later. We appreciate you being patient with us. I had to get all set up here. But the day he committed to Florida in late June, and Corey, you'll remember this. I was down in South Florida at his commitment ceremony. Yep. And he said it. He said, hey, look, man, if they don't start the season great, who knows what will happen? So you're looking at Florida's record and you're saying, well, they're 3-2. That's not terrible. He said if they start 2-6, they're 3-2. But the two teams that Florida played on the schedule that are legit teams this season really kind of wiped the floor of Florida. Let's just be honest. They beat them pretty badly, beat them pretty soundly. Now, that doesn't mean Florida can't become a better team as the season goes on. But in those two games, in Miami and Texas A&M, and Josh Moore was at both those games, Florida got beat soundly, did not look good at all on either side of the ball, and really any phase outside of special teams. So even though he was back on campus the other day and Florida beat UCF, I've maintained I don't think UCF's that strong this year. I don't think they're very good up front. An 11-point win. I mean, Colorado just beat them by 27 points. And by the way, Joshua Moore was at that game too. So he saw what Colorado in person did to the same UCF team that Florida was up 24-3 at the half. I mean, it's not like Florida wasn't in control of the game. It was. But in the second half, the foot came off the gas. UCF made it at least somewhat interesting. The Florida offense went into a shell, didn't really do anything, ended up with well under 400 yards. And Josh Moore, like you said, we couldn't get a hold of him after the game. So significant loss for Florida. He is decommitted. Florida now, Corey, left with 2 receiver commits. But let me just go over this the commitment list real quickly for Florida. And by the way, I mean, obviously flipping to Miami, he's now one of the jewels of their class. So it's the double whammy, Corey, of losing arguably your most talented recruit and to a team that just blew the doors off you. And you have to play them again next year. And you have to win recruiting battles in South Florida to be a legit program again. And quite frankly, Florida's not really a legit program right now on the field. Are they building toward that? They think they are. The results haven't really matched up with that yet. I know they feel good about beating UCF, but I don't think that really opened too many eyes. So anyway, commitment list, Corey. I'm doing all the yapping here. Florida now 29th in the country. They were inside the top 20 for a while, but now have lost 2 commitments. Joshua Moore and 4-star safety Demetrius Samuel, who flipped to Syracuse of all places. Florida now 29th in the rankings. Florida has only 12 commitments in this portal age. That's not the worry that it used to be, but again, all your competitors, all your rivals have more commitments than that. Corey, what does this do to the class as a whole? And then we'll get into what it does for the receivers.
Yeah, I think just overall, obviously, it's a stinger losing a guy of that caliber. But I think, thankfully for Florida, I think wide receiver is probably one of their deeper positional groups as far as his commitment list. Like you noted, Keith, Vernell Brown, I mean, according to the On 300 rankings, Joshua Moore was the highest ranked commitment. But when you kind of look at the industry generated, the average between all the recruiting sites, it was Vernell Brown, who is probably, like you said, the most well-rounded receiver in that group. And you have 4-star wide receiver Nashawn Montgomery as well, who's a deep threat, a guy on Miami Central, plays against top competition. So luckily for Florida, they have to hold on to both those guys as we kind of approach signing day in December. But they have 2 high-quality commitments at that position. And, they're still in the running for some other guys, too, at other position groups. But I think either way, you can't really – this is one of those ones I think Florida fans aren't too surprised by as far as the prospect that decommitted. Yeah. But I think having those 2 other guys in the class softens the blow a little bit. But I think 6'4", prototypical size. I think Billy Gonzalez wants those big-time pass catchers with size on the perimeter, and he fit that mold perfectly. And you kind of look at his commitment, too, after the losses. He would consistently say, I'm 100% committed. I'm still a Gator. And then, his dad is one I know with Steve Wilfong. He's even admitted, hey, I'm a huge Canes fan. I'm not going to, push my son in any direction, anything like that. But, Miami was the kind of the household school for that family growing up. So, yeah, I think overall, it's a stinger, but I think you also have 2 other gems in the class, especially Vernell Brown, who was one of the best regardless of position.
You're softening that a lot more than I did.
I think with Vernell Brown, though, in the class, that helps a little bit still. But still, though, you can't really – it's definitely a difficult pill to swallow.
Yeah, Vernell Brown's fantastic. By the way, Nashawn Montgomery's having a great season. He was the offensive MVP for his team just this past week. He had another big game as Miami Central beat Miami Northwestern in the big game down there. I believe they call that the Soul Bowl. Yeah. Fantastic player. So those guys are good. Now, another silver lining. I mean, look, guys, we're trying to be fair here, okay? But they needed to win games. They needed to look better. They needed to hold on recruits, and so far, none of that's really happened. So this is going to put a lot of pressure on this staff. These guys are working their asses off. It's hard. It's hard right now. So anyway, another silver lining though is that Florida does have another 6'4" receiver in this class. Not named Vernell Brown, who's 5'10.5. Not named Nashawn Montgomery, who's 6'1". It's Tayshawn Gelsey, outstanding player in his own right from Jacksonville Riverside. Now, Florida has recruited him as a tight end athlete. Tulane, by the way, which is a pretty good program. I mean, doing things that some schools we know haven't been doing lately. Tulane was recruiting him as a receiver and still is. And so they think that he could be a high-end receiver. So maybe Florida says, all right, look, I already have 2 tight ends in this class, Micah Jones and Tayshawn Gelsey. Maybe Gelsey gets a look at receiver if there's no fill-in for this other big receiver, but with the loss of Josh Moore. But there's so many moving parts right now. I mean, you got the season going on. Florida's 3-2. This Tennessee game's huge. Next week's game against Kentucky's huge. I mean, if they don't get to a bowl game, first of all, we don't even really know. Nobody knows about how stable things are right now. We hear things, everybody hears things. But so the program's in this weird place. Well, up until a couple weeks ago, they hadn't lost any commitments. To their credit, the staff was doing an outstanding job with these relationships. NIL, obviously a big part of it, had done a great job. Nobody had decommitted despite Florida coming out of the gate 1 and 2. Meanwhile, guys were decommitting from FSU. So it was, it was not, look, I mean, they were doing something right.
Yeah.
But now commitments are starting to back off their pledges. Again, 4-star safety Demetrius Samuel flips to Syracuse, where the head coach Fran Brown is a DB guy. So that was significant, Corey. And so I've got all this stuff going on here.
That was probably a bigger surprise too. I don't think anyone saw that one coming either,
So 12 commitments. Like you said, not terrible at receiver right now. That's a position you can get guys out of the portal too. But it's this is a staff that really wanted to hang its hat on evaluations. They did a great job evaluating Josh Moore. A lot of people did, but they did in particular. Great job recruiting him, winning him over, making him feel comfortable, but yet couldn't hold on. Now, could they get him back in the fold? We don't know, because we don't know who the head coach of Florida is going to be in 2 weeks, 4 weeks at the end of the season. So there's so many moving parts. All we can go off of is what we know right now. And to this current staff, which is fighting hard to save their jobs, it's a crushing blow. Corey, let's get to some of the comments here. And they're about what you think they are. And Jim Martin, only more bad news coming. I mean, maybe. I mean, they're going to have to win something at some point. They're going to have to beat somebody decent. Fragrance Journey, I'm not worried about any recruits at this point. Jim, back with Jim, he was gone. Speaking of Josh Moore after the Miami loss. Mr. Bassman says recruiting is meaningless since we know the reset is coming. It is and it isn't. And Corey, I want to ask you about this.
Yeah.
And Bassman, I totally get what you're saying. But on the other hand, even if you make a change at the top, a new coach can't come in with 0 commitments. I mean, there's got to be some foundation with which to work. And so the longer Florida could keep these guys committed, the better it would be for whether Billy Napier survives to hold on to them, for the NIL people, for another coach if Billy Napier doesn't survive. So it's interesting. Corey, what do you think? I mean, is recruiting meaningless at this point? I mean, you are building relationships. Kids are visiting. Even seniors are visiting. And if they like Florida, they may give Napier a chance. If he survives, they may give the next guy a chance, because they may say, you know what? I just visited in October. I loved it there. Let me see if this new staff likes me. So in that sense, maybe it's still pretty relevant. What do you think, Corey?
Yeah, I think meaningless probably with the underclassmen for sure, because obviously they're a year away. But as far as commitments, I think it's still huge. Like you said, Keith, a foundation. These guys are committed. Kind of give them, like Vernell Brown's a perfect example. I think regardless of the coach, I think in my opinion he sticks. And obviously sometimes that happens with those relationships they built, that comfort level they have in Gainesville altogether. I get to a certain point, maybe they're wasting their time with certain kids, maybe some 2025 prospects. They're trying to flip from other schools, big schools. It's a tough sell for the staff, but I don't think it's meaningless when it comes to keeping these kids in the class. You still got to recruit them, especially this NIL era. I mean, you look at this class now. I mean, we all kind of knew there was going to be some kids probably moving on. We didn't know when they were going to probably decommit or flip to a school, but I think, Keith, you've laid it out many times. We've done it on the site. Joshua Moore is one of those guys. Miami's winning on the field, and look, that's what happens when you're winning on the field. You have a family. That's a school close to home. I was surprised by the timing of it, but I wouldn't say it's meaningless. I think the most important thing is keeping these guys in the class. That's where the recruiting is right now. Yeah, you're going to get some under the radar guys, possibly to join the class late, because Florida might be their biggest offer. But obviously keeping these guys in the class, I think that's why Keith and I'll say this. We're writing about a lot of the commits right now, because that's what's important. And that's what, I think most fans want to read about. Who are we going to keep and hold on to?
Well, the other thing is, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, not only is Miami winning. So if you're a Miami booster right now, if you're somebody that's contributing to their NIL, you're saying, you can say to yourself and your friends, look, see, I helped get that guy. Look what he's doing. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so they went out and they did so well in the portal, and those guys are producing. And at Florida, I don't know that people were giving money with any real confidence. You needed money for this guy, and what's he doing? Right? I mean, Elijah Badger's doing well, and I'm not going to get into the financials. We don't really ask about that, but Elijah Badger, receiver's doing well. Shamir DK, receiver's doing well. But at the end of the day, Florida's 3-2. But the 2 losses are to the 2 good teams they played. So the return on investment. So Miami fans are seeing a return on investment right now. So William Fisher says Miami has no quarterback. Well, but now Miami can sell. Look what's happening with Cam Ward to quarterbacks in the portal this coming offseason. So, it's interesting. Fragrance points out, didn't want to play with Lagway, so blank him. There's so many dynamics in play. Miami's winning. It's close to home. His father loves Miami. Florida's not looking great on the field. But you do have that Lagway factor. And I think if you were Florida, you were optimistic. If our NIL as a program can keep ground with other people or keep track with other people, you can really sell Lagway. And so far they had, and Joshua Moore in particular has talked about wanting to play with DJ Lagway. And look what this guy can do. And he's special. And also he said, I'm the missing piece to what they have or what they don't have. He's looking at Florida and he would say, okay, they're doing this, this, and this, but they're not doing this. They don't have this guy. Well, what is that guy? That's me, Josh Moore. So it's got to be crushing for Florida. I don't think there's any doubt about that. All right, let's get to some comments. Matthew says Lane Kiffin will reel him back in. We'll have to see what happens. I mean, we don't really know. Mr. Bassman says he doesn't really follow recruiting anymore. It's a waste, which is funny because then why am I listening to this? Hey, we love you, man. Don't go anywhere.
We appreciate you, Bassman.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll say I want to do your opinion on this real quick, Keith. I mean, do you think with Tank Hawkins, 2 different type of pass catchers, elusive slot guy. I mean, even Mizell when he is healthy. I mean, seeing those guys emerge and making plays, do you think that, I'm not going to say soften the blow, but do you think that helps Florida having some younger pass catchers in the class?
Well, maybe.
On the team,
but now you've got there's so many balls in the air right now. So even if Billy Napier survives, which receivers say, I didn't get the ball enough, I'm out of here?
Yeah.
Which receivers say, I got the ball a lot, but they didn't win. I want to go play somewhere that's winning more, right?
Yeah.
And then they've got to make sure that Lagway doesn't go anywhere. Now, he says all the right things. I mean, nobody – by the way, we're not suggesting that DJ Lagway's leaving. We don't know.
Yeah.
But as a program, you have to make sure you lock up all your key guys every year. So there's just so many things going on. I don't know. I mean, Florida does have a young, solid group of receivers. There's no question about that. But when you look at – and I know Alabama lost to Vanderbilt, but when you look at the programs like Alabama, and I want to say Georgia's weakness is actually receiver. They're pretty good everywhere else. But a lot of the elite programs, they have guys that look like Josh Moore.
Yeah.
I mean, they have guys that look like Josh Moore and play like Josh Moore. So, we don't know how he's going to pan out. Of course, nobody knows. But based on what he's done at this level right here, he projects to be an outstanding player. So anyway, all right, Harrison says, tell us what you really think, Keith. There you go, Michael. There you go. Michael says, we don't really need him. We have plenty of elite receivers. And Michael, and that's a good point. And also Florida went out and got 2 solid receivers in the transfer portal this year. Now, I guess the question would be if Billy Napier survives, I think 2 of Florida's 3 starting receivers are portal guys. So what do the other guys on the team say? Oh, gosh, I waited out my turn and they went out and recruited over me in the portal. So FSU had a problem with that. And that ultimately hurt them too, as they got a reputation for recruiting so heavily out of the portal. So it's like once you get into this hole, it seems like no matter what you do, you just can't climb out of it. It's crazy. All right, let's see here.
I'll say one thing, Keith. It's good that you didn't make that trip to South Florida. I know you're discussing about going down there to see Josh.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus.
William says Josh Moore left the class because he saw Aiden Mizell, Tank Hawkins, and those other elite wide receivers were coming. He didn't want to compete. I mean, look, I don't personally think that's the case. I think he just probably looked at Miami's winning. Florida wasn't looking great. But also, we don't know behind the scenes. We don't know the NIL stuff. We only hear things. His dad was emphatic to me when I was down with them in June that, hey, that's not a big part of the equation. I work. His mom works. But, we've heard that before from people, and we just don't know that situation. But we know Miami's winning. And when you're winning, people are lining up to contribute to your NIL. So it's interesting. Yeah. Shakita says Miami will be sorry again once Cam leaves for the league. She makes a great point. What if they didn't pick up Cam Ward this season? Yeah. I mean, they've got at least 2 losses right now, but they do have him though. So you can play the ifs and buts game. But appreciate the comment there, Miss Ware. All right, let's get to a couple more. Need to focus on getting the right head coach, and the talent will come. Shakita, again, Lane will get us better receivers. It sounds like everybody thinks Lane Kiffin's going to be coaching the Florida
Gators.
Gators.
A lot of Lane fans out there.
Another one, get Napier out of Gainesville, keep Strickland away from the coaching search. I mean, there's just a lot of – I think people are just upset right now, Corey, because now you got 2 decommitments. The team hasn't looked great. You're coming off a sort of a feel-good win against UCF, Corey, but even that game, Florida didn't keep the foot on the gas in the second half, so people didn't feel as good as they wanted to feel. At halftime, they felt really good. Maybe this team's a lot better than we think. By the end of the game, it was like, same old team. That's what people were thinking. So it's tough right now. And then you have a decommitment, and the Florida fan is just kind of beaten down right now. All right, Clifford says if Florida beats FSU, we'll be the second to the top 4 teams in Florida. Would that mean anything? I think it would mean something if you had 8 or 9 wins. I don't know if it means much, Clifford, if you got 5 wins, to be honest with you.
Especially at that time of year. We don't even know where the program's going to be, who's going to be coaching that time of year. That's just the honesty with it.
So much uncertainty here. But again, we feel like it was important for Florida to hold on to as many of these guys as possible, because what if, let's just play the hypothetical here. Everybody's writing off Billy Napier, Corey, but if he survives, he's got to have a class, right? He's got to have a recruiting class. Because what happens then now is if Billy Napier somehow survives and this class continues to fall and lose guys, and they're scrambling late to add 3-star guys, and, we'll hear about all these diamonds in the rough. Well, I think 2 or 3 diamonds in the rough a class is acceptable. I think 12 or 13 diamonds in the rough in a class, you're probably not getting closer to your rivals. But here's the real issue, Corey. If you can't keep this class together and you survive, then you go into next year on the hot seat again, and you're facing the same obstacles that you're facing right now. That could be a second big average class in a row. And that's kind of, even in this portal age, that's sort of a crushing blow. So anyway, all right, let's get your final thoughts, Corey. Actually, let me see if we want to get a couple more comments in here. This person speaks volumes. Not happy with Josh Moore, I guess, would be the theme of Freedom's post. Freedom, we appreciate you. Not laughing at you, laughing with you. It's just, everybody's sort of on edge right now in the state of Florida with this big storm. You got this news. You got a football team that's going to Tennessee, and the eye of the storm is literal, and it's swirling around this program. So it's a funky, funny, weird, surreal time. All right, Corey, let's wrap it up. I mean, I've been talking in circles, haven't said anything really worth a damn, but you have.
No, you're good, man.
Where does Florida go from here? I mean, can they got to hang on to some more? I mean, there's Joseph Mbachu, the defensive lineman. He's taken visits to Texas, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia. Jeremiah McLeod, another defensive line commitment. He has visited Georgia and FSU. They got to hold on to these guys. Where does Florida go from here, Corey?
No, I think you said it right, Keith. I mean, these are some of the guys we've been talking about for several weeks now, guys that we are monitoring closely that kind of could flip elsewhere. Like you said, I still think there'll probably be a few more before it's all said and done. But I think overall, I'm just not surprised, really. I think Joshua Moore, I know Florida, they could win some more games, but I think when it was all said and done, we kind of expected him, at least me, not to be in the class. So I think just overall, just actually seeing it though and writing him flipping, especially to a school like Miami, it makes it that much worse. But I think overall, you kind of got to look at the situation at Florida. I think it could be a lot worse right now. I think they probably could have lost a few more guys considering how the season started. I still think you have those jewels in the class with Vernell Brown. And I think I want to go back to something you said too, Keith. If Napier does survive, it does kind of make it a wait and see for prospects in the 26 class too, going into next season. And I'm just not sure that's what you want as a program, because like you said, recruiting is going to kind of suffer from that to a certain degree. So it just makes you wonder. But also, if Florida does make a move at head coach, it's a type of school it's going to make a splash harder, you would think, this time around. You can kind of tell after the last few failures as far as, coaching turnover and all that. I think this time they're going to want to make it right and kind of get a big fish, a big name. I know people mentioned Lane Kiffin. I think from an offensive standpoint, that would resonate with a lot of recruits. And that's the thing, too. You can kind of look at where Florida is now, but when a new coach comes in, if that does happen, then you sell hope, hey, it's a new era, and then guys get excited about wanting to be at Florida again. So I think right now, it's what we expected. I'm not surprised by it, but I think obviously the bleeding is not going to stop anytime soon. I think they'll lose maybe a few more guys, but we'll see. I think it also rides on Billy Napier, how he finishes off this year, if he does finish off this year. So I think right now, I think the best way to put it's a big wait and see right now, especially in recruiting.
This was kind of a perfect storm going into this recruiting cycle. Florida had those games that it could have easily won last year that lost, the Arkansas game, the Missouri game, the FSU game. If you win 2 of those, you got 7 wins. Maybe you win an 8th game in a bowl game. And it's a whole different vibe going into the offseason. But once Florida lost to FSU and secured that losing season, which is 3 losing seasons in a row, then it really became this situation where Florida had to recruit against the chatter. And the key to the hot seat is to never get on the hot seat. And I've seen this at other schools. I've covered schools that were beating Alabama and Georgia for recruits 1 year, coach gets on the hot seat, and 3 years later they're competing with NC State and Arkansas for guys. And no, all due respect to those programs, they're not Alabama and Georgia. And those are the schools you have to compete against if you're Florida to get to that higher level. So it was always going to be a difficult class. Florida had to go out and play well this season. And I know internally they think they've turned the corner. They think they're heading in the right direction. But a couple things, so if you saw UCF play Colorado the week before, you're probably thinking, well, they're not that great. And then you look at Florida's schedule coming up: at Tennessee, home against Kentucky, off week, Georgia, Texas on the road, LSU at home, Ole Miss at home, FSU on the road. There's no gimme in there. As bad as FSU is, that's the last game of the year. They're going to put everything into that game. There's no gimmies, right? And so if Florida's sitting here at 5-0 right now, Corey, or 4-1, I don't think we're having this discussion. I think they may have even added a commitment or 2.
Yep.
But the losses to Miami and Texas A&M, they were hard to get out of the minds of the fan, and I think those losses have stuck some with the recruits as well. So anyway, that will do it for this rapid reaction. Look, it's always – when you're a Gator fan, there's peaks and valleys. Brighter days are always ahead. We know that, so hang in there, everybody. Don't get too down. Be safe this week. Don't be a fool. Get out of the storm. Corey and I are taking care of ourselves. I'm at a hotel at Disney. Corey's
I'm still in the same spot, so I mean, I don't have nothing to really brag about.
You live in a fortified mansion, okay? I'm at a Sheraton at Disney with kids running around screaming. But anyway, we'll do it again soon. For Corey Bender, I am Keith Niebuhr. This is the Gators Online Rapid Reaction. Take care, everybody, and thank you so much for taking the time to stop by and checking out Gators Online. Please be safe this week. Please. We want to do this again soon, and we need each of you to be here. Take care, everybody.